FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
Dr. Moyo, another idea that you raise as distinctly possible in your book is the idea of an American default, that the US is already becoming one of the world's biggest debtor nation, and maybe the way out of this is just to stop paying the debt. How likely do you think that is?
Well, there are many people who would argue they're already doing it by weakening their currency. And in fact, you might recall ahead of President Hu Jintao's visits, a lot of the headlines in the papers were saying that China was coming here to basically say to the U.S. government, by the way, don't weaken your currency so much and basically owe us next to nothing. And so people would argue that the U.S. is already engaging in stealth default by allowing the exchange rate to depreciate. Let me be clear again, this is a nuclear option. It's not something that I'm recommending. I think default is a bad option. I think it's something that could be very detrimental given the interlinkages that we have globally and that are very well known. But we've seen countries, big countries, Germany, the United Kingdom, many, many emerging countries over time default on their debt when they simply cannot repay. And so does that mean that there's zero possibility that America could default? Of course not. Is there a possibility that the United States might decide to restructure their debt, which is a nice fancy term for defaulting? Yeah, I think that they could. I could think that they could restructure their debt. I don't think it's something that's number one top item on the list, but clearly at some point, and particularly now where we are, where interest rates have started to rise and the burden of debt is becoming much more onerous, something has to give. Whether it means you're going to cut back on expenditure in certain areas, might have to claw back in the military, claw back. I mean, the proposals are for discretionary spending, but maybe more on entitlements. Who knows what has to cut back? But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have revenues and your expenses are going up, something has to give, and therefore default definitely comes back on the table. I'll just recommend one book here because I think it's quite fascinating. There's a book that was published by Carmen Reinhardt and Ken Rogoff called This Time It's Different, 8 Centuries of Financial Crises, I think is what it's called. But it goes over 800 years, and it lists out default, and you will be amazed at the number of countries that have actually defaulted, whether it's Argentina, Mexico, but as I said, places like Germany, the United Kingdom, and therefore the idea that big countries would never default, I think is something that is not true.